The ticket was snatched from her hand, crumpled like trash, and tossed over a shoulder. The sound of paper crushed echoed through the quiet first-class cabin, then fell silent. Clara Mitchell, 60, 5 years old, had no time to react before the reading glasses on her nose slipped to the floor. A stiletto heel came down hard on the fragile frame. Crack! The lens shattered like mocking laughter, cutting through her dignity. The one who did it, Sophie Turner, the 32-year-old chief flight attendant, smiled with malice, a thin smile sharp as a blade. Clara sat still in seat 1A. Her frail knuckles whitened as they clutched the armrest. She lowered her gaze to the shards of glass glittering under the cabin lights. Then she lifted her head, her eyes unblinking, calm to the point of chilling. No one in the cabin spoke. A man switched on his camera. A woman inhaled and held her breath. The whole cabin felt as though they had just witnessed a quiet execution, with the victim refusing to fight back. In Sophie's mind, the victory was far too easy. An old, dark-skinned woman stepping into first class as if she belonged there. Impossible. She deliberately raised her voice. "This isn't your place." But Clara did not answer. She calmly opened her handbag. Her fingers slid past a wallet, a glasses case, and stopped on a flat sheet of paper. Every movement was deliberate, unhurried. She pulled out a pristine copy of the ticket and unfolded it in front of Sophie. "Seat 1A, first class, fully paid." Her voice was smooth, like silk drawn across a blade. Passengers whispered. Some leaned to get a closer look. Sophie burst into a shrill laugh, a piercing sound that grated the air. "Fake ticket, printed at home. Did you think I wouldn't know?" A businessman in seat 2C leaned to his wife and muttered, "Probably stole the reservation code." His wife nodded. "Happens all the time. People pretending to be wealthy." Clara heard every word, but her face did not change. Her phone buzzed. A message lit up. "Board meeting moved to 9 a.m. tomorrow. David." She typed quickly. "Flight delayed. Meeting today at 5 p.m. Handle it for me." Then she set the phone down. Sophie grabbed the intercom, her voice sharp. "Mark, I need you up in first class. We have a situation." Minutes later, Mark Evans, the 50-year-old supervisor, arrived. His seasoned eyes scanned the scene. An elderly woman in simple clothes, shattered glasses on the floor, a crumpled ticket in the corner. He immediately drew his own conclusion: a confused passenger or someone trying to cheat. "Madam, I'm Mark Evans, the cabin supervisor. Is there an issue with your seat?" Clara held out the new ticket. Mark examined it carefully. The confirmation code was valid. The date matched. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. He sighed. "Sometimes booking systems double. I can reassign you to premium economy. On your next flight, I'll upgrade you to first class." Clara looked him in the eye, her voice steady and firm. "Mr. Evans, I am in my rightful seat, seat 1A. I will not move." Murmurs rose around them. A young passenger started live streaming, whispering, "Do you see this? She has a first-class ticket, and they're trying to kick her out. This is blatant discrimination." The viewer count shot up. 500, then 1,000. Clara reached into her wallet for ID. As she pulled out her license, a flash of black caught the light. The American Express Centurion card. The legendary card reserved only for those spending more than $250,000 annually. Mark's heart faltered for a second, but Sophie clenched her jaw, whispering in his ear, "Look at her. Does she look like someone who could afford that card? People like her are nothing but trouble." The live stream count surged past 3,000. Comments poured in. "Outrageous. Sue them. Disgraceful." Clara's phone rang again. Caller ID David, son, she declined. A message followed instantly. "Mom, what's happening? It's blowing up online." Clara's eyes stayed calm, but inside her chest a slow fire rose. She knew the moment of revelation had not yet come, but it would. To Sophie and Mark, she was just an old woman out of place. To the crowd, she was beginning to look like a living emblem of injustice, and to Clara herself, this was only the opening act. For a game of chess they had no idea they were playing, against an opponent they never expected. The sound of shoes pounding against the carpeted floor silenced the first-class cabin. Captain Richard Hayes, 50, 2 years old, tall and lean in his crisp uniform, with golden stripes glinting, appeared. He did not need to say a word. His very stride was enough to reassure many passengers that justice had arrived. But Clara saw something different instantly. The first look Hayes gave her was not one of neutrality, but of prejudice. It was the heavy look of someone who had already decided he was facing a troublemaker before hearing a single word of explanation. "What is going on here?" Hayes asked, his voice clipped and deliberately loud to assert authority. Mark Evans held out Clara's ticket and papers, speaking loudly enough for the entire cabin to hear. "This passenger insists on occupying seat 1A. We explained, but she refuses to move." Clara sat still, her hands resting neatly on her lap. Dozens of phone cameras pointed at her. The live stream count climbed. 10,000, 12,000. Hayes glanced at the ticket for only a few seconds, just long enough to give the appearance of checking, then tilted his chin. "Madame, we must keep the schedule. Please move to economy immediately." The air froze. A passenger whispered, "Why didn't he even bother to check properly?" Clara lifted her head, her eyes clear, her voice calm but firm. "Captain Hayes, my ticket is valid. This seat is mine. I will not leave." The only sound in the cabin was the murmur of outrage. A man in seat 2C scoffed loudly. Probably paid with a fake card. Clara heard every word. She swallowed the pain, choosing silence instead. And that silence weighed heavier than any shout could. Hayes frowned and turned to Mark. "Call security. If she will not move, remove her from the plane." The words dropped like a hammer. Sophie's smile bloomed, a thin smile that only Clara could see for what it was. Malicious satisfaction. Minutes later, 2 uniforms appeared. Officer Daniel Cruz, 48, seasoned, with a quiet but compassionate gaze, and Officer Ethan Park, 30, younger and clearly unsettled by the sea of raised phones. Daniel stepped closer to Clara, his voice steady and gentle. "Madam, please cooperate with the crew. We can resolve this peacefully. May I see your documents once more?" Clara handed them directly to him. Daniel examined them carefully. The ticket, the confirmation code, the name, all valid. He gave a slight nod, his voice firm. "Captain, all documents are in order. Mrs. Mitchell has the right to sit here." A ripple of noise spread. Live stream comments flooded in. "She's right. Don't kick her out." The number surged past 20,000. But Hayes waved it off. "I don't care about the documents. This passenger has delayed the flight for 15 minutes. Remove her immediately." Clara remained seated, her hands folded in her lap, unnervingly calm. Inside her, a different flame ignited. Not anger, but resolve. Then, unexpectedly, an elderly white woman in seat 3B spoke up. "Excuse me, but this is ridiculous. She has a valid ticket." "Why are you expelling her?" Sophie snapped, eyes sharp. "Be quiet, Mrs. Glattis. We know how to handle this." It was the second invisible slap, not just for Clara, but for everyone who believed in fairness. The wall clock showed 4 o'clock sharp. The final boarding call echoed from the gate. "Flight 447, preparing for departure." The weight of time pressed down on the crew. Clara glanced at the simple Rolex on her wrist, a Christmas gift from her son. Her voice was low but steady. "I have an important meeting in New York. I do not have time for this charade." Mark looked to Hayes. The captain gave a curt nod and pressed the intercom. "Call additional security. We are preparing to remove this passenger." Every phone was raised. The live stream soared past 30,000. Some passengers whispered, "This is too much. This is clearly discrimination." Clara sat still, her chest rising and falling. Inside her bag, she felt the cold edge of a thick business card. Her true identity could end the careers of everyone standing before her. But she did not reveal it yet. She only whispered to herself, "They still have no idea who they are playing chess with." 2 security officers closed in around seat 1A. Captain Hayes stood blocking the aisle, arms folded like a verdict waiting to be delivered. Behind him, Sophie and Mark watched with triumphant eyes, certain that everything was already decided. The cabin was thick with silence. Only the steady beep beep from the live stream broke it, announcing the rising viewer count. 40,000. 50,000. Online, tens of thousands of eyes were waiting for a humiliating spectacle. A woman dragged from the very seat she had paid for. Daniel Cruz lowered his voice, almost a whisper. "Mrs. Mitchell, I do not want to use force. Please allow me to handle this quietly." Clara turned her head and looked into eyes that had seen many injustices. She found in them a glimmer of conscience, suppressed by orders. "Officer Cruz, I respect your professionalism, but you know well, I am not wrong." With that, she calmly reached into her bag. The air stretched tight like a drawn string. Sophie frowned, suspecting she was reaching for something dangerous. Mark stepped back half a pace, his hand brushing against his radio. But Clara only drew out her phone. She lifted it slowly, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. "I want to make a call. After that, whatever you choose to do to me, I will accept." Captain Hayes barked, his voice cracking like a whip. "The flight is already late. No more theatrics." The harshness in his tone stunned many passengers. A few in the rear cabin stood up, phones raised to capture every angle. On screen, the comments poured in. "Let her make the call! This is a violation of human rights." Clara turned to face the cameras broadcasting live, her gentle eyes suddenly flashing with steel. "You are witnessing why corporate culture must be rebuilt from its core. This is no longer about one seat. This is the truth. Evidence dismissed only because of prejudice." Sophie sneered. "You think a few words will change anything?" But her laugh was swallowed instantly by the ding of a new message on Clara's phone. The screen lit up with a name. David Mitchell. She pressed decline. The phone rang again at once. Her son would not give up. Clara drew a deep breath. Then, ignoring Captain Hayes's searing glare, she pressed the call button. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Hayes lunged forward to snatch it away, but Daniel Cruz suddenly raised a hand, stopping him. "Captain, wait. Everything is streaming live. You do not want to be filmed ripping a phone out of the hands of an elderly woman." A flicker of unease crossed Hayes's face. He pulled back, though his eyes burned with fury. The 4th ring ended, and a man's voice rang out on speaker. "Where are you?" The cabin fell into dead silence. Clara closed her eyes and whispered softly, "Son, I am on flight 447, and I need you now." That name, David Mitchell. A few passengers stiffened, whispering, "That sounds familiar." The live stream exploded. "Is that David Mitchell, the airline's CEO?" A chill swept down Hayes's spine. The name was so familiar that his heartbeat stumbled. Clara opened her eyes, calm but piercing, and extended the phone toward Hayes. "Captain, my son would like to speak with you directly." The cabin froze. Every gaze locked on the small phone in Clara's hand, the weapon no one had seen coming. Captain Richard Hayes reached out to take the phone, but his hand trembled, sweat dampening his dry palm. It felt as though he were touching a live time bomb. The entire cabin held its breath. Even the faint whispers vanished into silence. "This is Captain Hayes, Flight 447. Who is on the line?" His voice was hoarse, straining to preserve a facade of authority. On the other end, a firm and icy male voice cut through. "I am David Mitchell. Do you know who I am?" A chill shot down Hayes's spine. The name was not unfamiliar. The sitting CEO of the airline, the man thousands of employees deferred to, the one who held the fate of every crew in his hands. "Sir, Mitchell," Hayes stammered. "I will take that as a yes. Then perhaps you can explain why my mother is calling me, on a flight belonging to my company, to tell me she is being forced out of the first-class seat she purchased legitimately." The cabin erupted in hushed shock. Passengers in the back quickly searched David Mitchell on their phones. Within seconds, someone whispered, "My God, it really is the CEO." The livestream surged past 75,000 viewers. Comments flooded in. "The CEO is on the line. This airline is finished." Hayes stumbled for an excuse. "Sir, there was a minor mix-up with seating. The crew was only following procedure." David's voice sliced in, sharp as a blade. "What procedure allows you to ignore valid documents proving a customer bought her seat? What procedure justifies stepping on the glasses of a 65-year-old woman and humiliating her in front of an entire cabin?" Sophie Turner's face drained of color. Mark Evans swallowed hard, his eyes darting as if searching for an escape. I want you to put me on speaker. Now. So every passenger and crew member can hear, David commanded. Hayes pressed the button slowly, his hand shaking as though he held a sword of fire. David's voice filled the cabin, each word crisp and inescapable. Ladies and gentlemen, I am David Mitchell, CEO of this airline, and you have just witnessed a systemic failure in our customer service. I apologize for that. A shockwave rippled through the cabin. Some passengers gaped, others covertly filmed to post online. The live stream soared past 100,000 viewers, the hashtag CEO's mother exploding across platforms. Clara sat composed in seat 1A, her deep eyes glowing with pride. She had no need to speak. The truth was speaking for itself. David's tone softened when he turned to his mother. Mum, have you been threatened or harmed in any way? Clara smiled faintly and answered just loud enough for the microphone to catch. I am fine, son. Only disappointed. The word disappointed hit harder than any outburst, tightening the hearts of many in the cabin. David's voice returned to steel when addressing Hayes. Captain, give me a detailed account of what happened. Hayes swallowed hard and muttered about her being disruptive and non-compliant, but his trembling voice betrayed him, every word digging his career deeper into the grave. David cut in, reciting clearly. Federal Aviation Law, Section 382.7, prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, gender, religion, or origin. Do you know it by heart, Captain? Hayes mumbled. Why, yes, sir. Then why was my mother, with a valid ticket, treated as though she were a fraud? Was it because she is a woman of color? The cabin froze. Sophie wanted to object, but her lips stiffened, unable to form a sound. David turned his voice directly on her. Miss Turner, would you like to explain yourself to all these passengers? Or shall I present the prior complaints filed against you for discriminatory conduct? Sophie went pale. Her fingers clenched the edge of the seat in a trembling grip. There was nowhere left to hide. Mark Evans bowed his head, sweat pouring down. He knew his career had just fallen into the hands of the man on the other end of the line. In the suffocating silence, Clara brushed her fingers against the firm edge of a business card in her bag, but did not draw it out. She did not need to. David was already doing it for her. At that moment, everyone in the cabin understood. The woman dismissed because of her modest appearance was no confused old lady out of place. She was the mother of the CEO, and those who had mocked her now quivered in the shadow of their own consequences. Clara lifted her face, her eyes calm as they swept across the cabin. From deep within, she knew. The game had just turned. The sound of the loudspeaker still echoed through the cabin, David Mitchell's voice cutting through the heavy air like a blade. I want the truth, and I want it now. Captain Hayes struggled to keep his balance, his knees trembling slightly. He glanced around, searching for an ally, but no one dared to meet his eyes. Sophie Turner avoided his gaze. Mark Evans stared at the floor, his hands twisting nervously. Answer me, Captain. David's voice sank lower, cold as ice. Did my mother violate any flight safety rules? No, sir, Hayes stammered. Did she resist or act violently? No, sir. Then why did you order her removed from the seat she rightfully purchased? A deathly silence fell. The hum of the ventilation system seemed to mock them. 120 passengers held their breath, their eyes fixed on the captain's pale face. Hayes opened his mouth, but no words came out. The only truth lay bare. He had judged Clara with prejudice and decided she did not belong. David pressed further. Was it because she is an older woman of color, dressed simply, not fitting the image of first class in your mind? The live stream surged past 120 thuls, 5,000 viewers. Thousands of comments poured in. Admit it. This is blatant racism. His career is over. Hayes bowed his head, sweat dripping onto his collar. His voice broke. I was wrong. A wave of whispers swept through the cabin. Some passengers clapped softly, others zoomed in with their cameras. Before their eyes, a 52-year-old captain had just crumbled under the weight of truth. David did not stop. His voice turned toward the next target, cold and relentless. Miss Turner, step forward. Sophie froze, her face drained of blood. Her steps faltered as if she were walking along the edge of a cliff. Tell me, why did you tear up my mother's ticket, crush her glasses underfoot, and call her not worthy? Sophie's entire body shook. Her voice cracked apart. I was wrong. I judged her only by her appearance. I didn't think she deserved. David's voice rose like a whip striking down. A customer with a valid, fully paid ticket, yet in your eyes still not worthy. Sophie burst into tears. For the first time during the ordeal, her cold mask shattered. She sobbed. Because she is a woman of color. And I thought the cabin erupted. Passengers gasped. Some shouted, "Racist!" "Shameful!" The live stream exploded past 150,000 viewers. The comments raced, "A confession on live camera." Clara sat still, her eyes shining with both pride and pain. She had endured humiliation, but now the truth stood exposed before the world. David's voice cut through once more. Thank you for your admission. But remember this. Power does not come from stepping on others. It comes from how we treat them. He turned to Mark Evans. And you, supervisor. Do you remember what you said? I will move you to premium economy and promise to upgrade you next time. You tried to bury the truth for the sake of a rotten system. Do you deny it? Mark shook his head, trembling. No, sir. David's words struck like a hammer. Then hear me clearly. As soon as this plane lands, Miss Turner will be immediately suspended without pay. Captain Hayes, you will report to headquarters on Monday morning for retraining and will be placed under oversight for the remainder of your tenure. Mark Evans, you will face the same disciplinary measures. This is an order. The cabin erupted. Some passengers clapped thunderously. Others shouted, "Justice!" The live stream spiked to 180,000 viewers. Officer Daniel Cruz gave a subtle nod, his eyes turning to Clara with respect. He knew he had just witnessed a chapter of aviation history being written. Clara finally spoke, her voice soft but piercing. David, you have done what I have long awaited. But remember, this is not just about me. This is about the thousands who never get the chance to call their sons. The cabin fell silent. All eyes turned toward the woman in seat 1A, her salt and pepper hair, her back straight, her eyes ablaze with dignity. David's voice softened. "I understand, Mother, and we will do more than this." In that moment, an entire system had been unmasked, and everyone knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of reform. The cabin still pulsed with the echo of David Mitchell's verdict. Passengers looked at one another, some still unable to believe they had just witnessed both the captain and the chief flight attendant being forced to bow their heads in shame mid-flight. The live stream had soared past 200,000 viewers, and with every second, millions more eyes around the world were watching. Clara Mitchell sat tall in seat 1A, her face composed, but in her mind, she knew punishment alone was not enough. The root of the problem remained, and on another day, on another flight, someone else would become the Clara Mitchell of today. She opened her handbag, her fingers finding a thick ivory envelope sealed with red wax. The moment it appeared, its weight was unmistakable. Patricia Carter, a gate supervisor who had boarded to observe the situation, gasped when she saw the words emblazoned across it. Board Resolution 2024-127. Clara raised the envelope slightly, her voice steady, not loud, but strong enough to pierce the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, in my hands is a board resolution approved last month. It was scheduled to be unveiled tomorrow in New York, but after what has happened today, I have decided to announce it here and now." Every camera turned toward her. Passengers held their breath. Sophie Turner, her face streaked with tears, looked up in confusion. Captain Hayes kept his head bowed, as if his very soul had been torn apart. Clara slowly drew out the document, her voice clear. "This is the reform program known as the Mitchell Protocol. A budget of $25 million will be allocated to develop artificial intelligence that can monitor bias, a real-time discrimination reporting system, and a zero-tolerance rule for any form of prejudice." A ripple of voices spread through the cabin. Some passengers began to clap, unable to restrain themselves. The live stream erupted. "My God, this is historic reform. She turned humiliation into revolution." David Mitchell was silent on the other end. For a moment, then his voice returned, softer, edged with pride. "Mother, I had no idea you had prepared so thoroughly." Clara smiled gently. "David, justice never comes from empty promises. It comes from action. Today the world has seen. Tomorrow, the entire industry must change." Officer Daniel Cruz stepped forward, his voice warm and resonant. "Ma'am, I salute you. In 20 years of airline security, I have never seen a passenger handle a crisis with such calm and strength." Clara turned toward him, her eyes full of gratitude. "Officer Cruz, your professionalism reminded me that there is still hope, and that is why the Mitchell Protocol matters, to protect not only passengers, but those like you who do their duty with integrity." Applause thundered through the cabin. Passengers who had sat silently now clapped in unison. Some shouted, "That's right! This is what we need!" Captain Hayes lifted his head, his eyes vacant. He knew his name was now forever tied to this humiliation. Yet the sharper pain was the realization that if he had been trained under the Mitchell Protocol from the beginning, perhaps he would not have lost his career. Sophie sobbed openly, her voice breaking. "Mrs. Mitchell, I am sorry. I do not deserve forgiveness, but please let me learn again. Let me change." Clara looked at the young woman. In her gaze there was no hatred, only a heaviness tinged with hope. "Turn your apology into action, Sophie. When one person is given the chance to change, an entire system can follow." The live stream now surged past 250,000 viewers. News outlets blasted breaking alerts. Airline CEO exposed in discrimination case involving his own mother. Mitchell Protocol unveiled mid-flight on Flight 447. David regained his commanding tone. "This is the first step. When this plane lands, I will call an emergency board meeting. The Mitchell Protocol will be implemented immediately. Not tomorrow, not next week, but now." Clara slid the papers back into the envelope, her voice gentle but resolute. "Today I did not just defend my seat in 1A. I defended the right of every passenger who will come after me to be treated with dignity." The cabin fell silent. A historic moment had just been etched in memory, not with shouting, but with the quiet strength of a woman once dismissed, who chose to turn pain into legacy. The aircraft doors finally closed, preparing for takeoff. But for everyone on board, they knew this flight carried far more than passengers and luggage. It was carrying a revolution. The engines roared to life, the familiar sound signaling the plane's departure from the runway. Yet in the first-class cabin, every heart knew this flight was unlike any before. It carried not only passengers and luggage, but also a deep fracture within the airline industry and the seed of a revolution. Clara Mitchell sat quietly in seat 1A, her hand resting lightly on the envelope she had just unveiled. The Mitchell Protocol. Every gaze seemed fixed on her, some filled with respect, others with regret, and many with hope. In the eyes of the passengers, she was no longer just an elderly woman humiliated on a flight. She had become a symbol of a truth that could no longer be hidden. Dignity cannot be bought, but it can be stolen with a single prejudiced glance. Social media was exploding. Hashtags, #Mitchell Protocol, #CEO Mother, and #Flight 447 all surged to the top of global trends. International outlets blasted urgent headlines. Airline scandal. CEO's mother subjected to discrimination on company flight. Mitchell Protocol, a $25 million plan to end bias in customer service, unveiled in the middle of a flight. Meanwhile, at the airline's operations center in Dallas, giant screens flickered with the live stream. Senior managers panicked. The PR department scrambled to draft statements. A young director whispered, "We've lost hundreds of millions in one afternoon. But if we handle this right, we might win back twice as much." On board, Captain Hayes sat frozen like stone. The cockpit, once his sanctuary, now felt like exile. He heard every round of applause for Clara, every furious comment outside calling his name. Each word, discrimination, bias, fell like rivets, sealing the coffin of his career. Sophie Turner was still in tears. She wiped her face, her voice trembling as she whispered to Clara, "Thank you for not humiliating me in front of everyone. I know I deserve to lose everything, but you gave me a chance." Clara looked at the young woman, her eyes no longer burning with anger, only bearing the weight of someone who had walked the path before. "Sophie, an apology is not enough, but if you turn your mistake into a lesson, you can save others from suffering the same." In the rows behind, passengers began to speak animatedly. A grey-haired man raised his voice. "This will be written into management textbooks. A company with a CEO brave enough to admit failure in the middle of a crisis. That's the beginning of real reform." The plane gained speed, the wind rushing past the windows. As the wheels lifted from the ground, the floating sensation carried everyone upward, with a new sense of belief. David Mitchell's voice still rang over the loudspeaker, calmer now, but carrying the same undeniable weight. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for witnessing and recording what has happened. No company survives without the trust of its customers in fairness. I promise the Mitchell Protocol will not be a slogan, but a complete reform." Applause erupted across the cabin, spreading even into the economy section. Everyone understood they had just witnessed something far greater than a flight. Clara gazed out the window. The sky opened wide, the afternoon sun glinting off the clouds like massive mirrors. Her mind wandered back to her youth, when she was refused service at a cafe because of her skin color. Then she had walked away in silence, carrying shame. Today she not only held her ground in Seat 1A, but forced an entire industry to change. A young passenger leaned toward a friend and whispered, "You know, one day when people ask where I was when the Mitchell Protocol was announced, I'll say, I was on that flight." The plane pierced through the cloud layer, soaring into the vast blue sky. And with it, a new era was taking shape, where respect would no longer be a privilege, but the default. As Flight 447 pierced through the clouds, the world outside was no longer the same. Every major news network broke into urgent broadcasts, sensational headlines flashing across the screens. CEO's mother humiliated on first-class flight. Mitchell Protocol $25 million. Plan to end bias, unveiled in mid-air. In the CNN newsroom, an editor clutching the breaking report muttered, "This is not just an airline scandal. This is a political, economic, and social turning point." At the same moment, the BBC aired a special segment. Clara Mitchell, from victim to symbol against bias. The screen showed her seated in 1A, calm amid a storm of cameras, with a caption beneath, "Dignity is not a privilege, it's a right." Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, every platform erupted. Millions of clips cut from the live stream spread like wildfire. Hashtags, #Mitchell Protocol, #Flight 447, and #Stand with Clara surged to the top. A sociology professor commented, "This is the Rosa Parks moment of the airline industry." In Congress, lawmakers immediately began debating. A member of the Transportation Committee declared bluntly, "We need hearings. We cannot allow an airline system steeped in bias to continue. The Mitchell Protocol must be studied as a model standard." At the Dallas headquarters of the airline, chaos reigned. The PR department fielded more than 5,000 calls in an hour from journalists, investors, and furious customers. Shares dipped slightly in afternoon trading, but market analysts warned, if the CEO can turn this crisis into opportunity, the airline could rebound stronger. On board, passengers continued to murmur. A middle-aged woman said to the person beside her, "I've flown hundreds of times and never seen a company stripped bare like this in front of its passengers. This is a lesson for all of us." A young man live-streamed, his voice buzzing with excitement. "I'm on the flight that changed history. Do you see this? She didn't need to shout, didn't need anger, yet she made the entire industry tremble." Clara Mitchell sat quietly in seat 1A, listening, absorbing it all. She was not seeking glory. She only felt one truth. The humiliations she had endured over 65 years had finally become a torch lighting the path forward. On the other end of the line, David Mitchell never let go of his phone. While directing his legal team to prepare a press release, he spoke to his mother with resolve. "Mother, we won't wait until tomorrow. The moment this plane lands, I will hold a press conference. The Mitchell Protocol will be announced publicly and implemented immediately." Clara closed her eyes, exhaling as though releasing a burden carried for half a lifetime. "Remember, David, the goal is not revenge. The goal is change." In a small New York studio, a corporate governance expert observed on live television, "Clara Mitchell is not just the mother of a CEO. She is proof of the power of dignity." And David Mitchell, by publicly bowing his head before hundreds of thousands, has turned shame into historic opportunity. Consumer advocacy groups swiftly called for the Mitchell Protocol to be adopted across the entire U.S. airline industry. European lawmakers echoed, urging EU carriers to study the model. On the plane, soaring over the Atlantic, many passengers quietly texted their families, "I just witnessed history." A father told his daughter over FaceTime, "Remember her name, Clara Mitchell. One day, you'll read about her in your textbooks." In the cockpit, Captain Hayes sat in silence, cold sweat on his brow. He knew his career had plummeted. Yet deep down, he also knew this truth had to be exposed. Sophie Turner, her eyes swollen and red, whispered as if confessing to herself, "I was wrong. I'll have to start over." As the aircraft leveled off at cruising altitude, a rare silence filled the cabin. It was not the silence of tension, but of transformation. Everyone knew that from this moment, aviation had entered a new chapter. The sky outside stretched vast and blue, as if opening its arms to a new era. And in the hearts of hundreds of thousands watching online, a question lingered. Will this change truly spread, or will it be buried once again by profit? The answer lay within the Mitchell Protocol that had just been unveiled, and in the resolve of those who had witnessed this day. The tires screeched against the runway at JFK, the sound slicing through the cabin like a bell tolling the dawn of a new era. Flight 447 had finally landed, but everyone on board knew the true journey was only just beginning. Inside the cabin, no passenger rushed to grab their luggage. Their eyes remained fixed on seat 1A, where Clara Mitchell sat upright, the envelope marked Mitchell Protocol. Resting neatly on her tray table, that image had already been broadcast across the world, a symbol of dignity and unshakable resolve. When the aircraft doors opened, a storm of camera flashes from dozens of reporters at the jet bridge lit up the space. Voices shouted over one another, "Mrs. Mitchell, how do you feel right now? What will the Mitchell Protocol change? Do you forgive the crew?" Clara descended slowly, each step steady and deliberate. She did not answer right away. The blinding lights struck her eyes, but she did not blink. Her silence carried a message. I will not bow. Behind her, Sophie Turner and Captain Hayes were escorted out, their faces hollow with defeat. Cameras turned sharply to capture them, broadcasting living proof of the cost of prejudice. In the main terminal, the press conference room was overflowing with journalists. The airline's official live stream was broadcast worldwide. David Mitchell appeared at the podium in a fitted black suit and deep blue tie, his face solemn, yet his eyes shining with pride as they found his mother seated in the front row. He began, each word clipped and resolute. Today this airline failed, but from that failure we choose to rise through truth. I apologize to my mother, passenger Clara Mitchell, and to every customer who witnessed the events on Flight 447. Cameras snapped in rapid succession. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Mitchell, who will be held accountable?" David answered without hesitation. The first responsibility is mine, as CEO. I allowed a flawed system to create space for bias. But there will be no more cover-ups. The employees involved have been suspended. The captain and supervisor will undergo mandatory retraining, and as of today, the Mitchell Protocol is immediately implemented. He raised the stack of documents in his hand. A budget of $25 million will fund AI, based bias monitoring, real-time reporting systems, and a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory conduct. This is not a slogan. This is the new law of this company. The press room erupted. Reporters raised their hands in a frenzy. One asked, "Do you believe the Mitchell Protocol will be enough to restore customer trust?" David nodded, then glanced toward his mother. Clara rose and stepped to the podium. Her voice was calm, steady, yet cutting through the noise. Trust does not come from promises. It comes from actions. Today, I do not stand here seeking revenge against those who humiliated me. I stand here to ensure no one else must endure the same. The room fell into a heavy silence. Her words carved themselves into the minds of everyone present. Clara lifted the envelope. The Mitchell Protocol is not a weapon to tear anyone down. It is a foundation to educate and to transform. If a young flight attendant who once made a mistake can learn again and serve with a renewed heart, then this system has succeeded. Applause thundered across the hall. Some reporters bowed their heads, not for the scoop they had captured, but out of respect for the silver-haired woman standing before them. In a corner, Sophie Turner wept quietly, whispering to a colleague, "She just saved my future, even after all I did to hurt her." The press conference stretched on for more than an hour. News of it spread across the globe within minutes. Rival airlines convened emergency meetings, while the U.S. government declared it would monitor the Mitchell Protocol as a national pilot program. When the cameras finally dimmed, Clara turned to her son, gently taking his hand. "You did the right thing. But remember, this is only the beginning." David gripped her hand firmly, his heart brimming with determination. He knew that from Flight 447, a new legacy had been born, and it was his duty to make it an undeniable reality. Outside, the New York night blazed with light, and in the glow of that city, Clara Mitchell's story began to ripple outward, like waves from a small stone cast into the ocean, expanding endlessly without end. 6 months after that fateful day on Flight 447, The atmosphere in the American airline industry had changed dramatically. People called it the Mitchell effect. At major airports, electronic boards no longer just displayed departure times. They also emphasized the Mitchell Protocol is in effect to ensure fairness for every passenger. At company headquarters, internal reports stunned many. Complaints of discrimination had fallen by more than 60%. Customer satisfaction scores had soared, especially among minority travelers. The airline's stock had rebounded strongly, even surpassing pre-scandal levels. Investors smiled, while the media coined a new phrase, the Mitchell paradox, turning crisis into profit through justice. Clara Mitchell had become a familiar face at international forums. She never sought the spotlight, but her presence was a living reminder. Dignity is not a privilege. It is a basic right. At Harvard University, the story of Flight 447 was added to crisis management courses. A professor stood before his students and said, "Remember, Mrs. Mitchell did not need power to make an entire system kneel. She only needed composure and self-respect." Meanwhile, those who once stood against her had begun walking their own new paths. Captain Richard Hayes, after completing mandatory retraining, stood before 200 pilots at the annual gathering. He admitted, "I let prejudice cloud my judgment. I forgot that every passenger is a human being with equal rights. I lost more than a career nearly destroyed. I lost myself. But thanks to the Mitchell Protocol, I am learning how to fly again, in the truest sense." The room was silent, then erupted in applause. Several young pilots jotted down notes. Never let bias override evidence. As for Sophie Turner, once remembered for her tears on a live stream, she returned after 40 hours of bias awareness training. On her very first flight back, she carefully arranged the luggage of an elderly black passenger, gently asked about her health, and at the end of the journey, the passenger smiled and said, "You treated me like family. Thank you." Sophie turned away, her eyes blurred with tears. She knew it was Clara who had given her a second chance to become a better human being, and this time she would not waste it. Mark Evans, the former supervisor who once tried to bury the truth, had been demoted to the training department. He now stood before new employees, teaching about the very scandal in which he had played a part. Bitter yet humbled, he told them, "If one day you must choose between protecting the system or protecting justice, remember Flight 447. Choose justice, because a broken system can be repaired, but lost honor can never be recovered." The Mitchell Protocol did not stop at America's borders. Japan, the UK, Brazil, even Middle Eastern carriers began reaching out to learn from it. At the United Nations, a draft resolution was underway to standardize the Mitchell Protocol for customer service industries worldwide. At a major conference in New York, Clara appeared in a simple ivory coat, standing before 500 corporate delegates. She spoke slowly, each word etched into memory. "I was once humiliated for my appearance, but I did not seek revenge. I turned it into an opportunity to educate. The Mitchell Protocol is not my legacy alone. It is the legacy of everyone who has ever been misjudged simply for who they are." The entire hall rose in a standing ovation that lasted unbroken. That night, back in her modest apartment, Clara sat by the window gazing at the city lights. Her phone buzzed. A message from David read, "Mom, tomorrow we will sign agreements to implement the Mitchell Protocol with 3 international airlines. But more importantly, I want you to know, you have changed this world." Clara smiled, her eyes glistening in the glow. She whispered softly, only to herself, "No, David, we are only just beginning." Outside, planes ascended into the night sky, carrying passengers of every color, nationality, and story. But since Flight 447, one truth was certain. Each of them would be greeted with equal respect. And the world knew that was the immortal legacy of Clara Mitchell. In a world where prejudice can strip away dignity with just a glance, Clara Mitchell proved the opposite. When one person stands firm, an entire system can change. Flight 447 did not only land in New York, it landed in history as a reminder that dignity is not a privilege, it is an inherent right. If you believe that respect must be given to everyone, press like to help this story reach further. Do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss the journeys ahead, where truth is revealed and justice is reclaimed. And finally, leave a comment with just 2 words, dignity, to affirm that you too stand on the side of what is right.